Today's topic is filariasis. So the filaria is also a nematode. So we are continuing with nematodes. So we have already discussed with tissue nematodes, and we have finished talking about intestinal nematodes. So these nematodes, they are specific in the sense they affect lymphatics and subcutaneous tissue. So these are called as filarial worms. So what are these? So these nematodes that dwell in the subcutaneous tissues and the lymphatics. There are about 8 species. These 8 species infect humans. Not launched. Anyway. This thing is coming every day. I don't know why. Hmm? Everyone has joined. Right. So filarial worms, these are nematodes that dwell in the subcutaneous tissue and the lymphatics. There are about 8 filarial species which infect humans, but among these, 4 are very important. These cause serious infections. So these are Wuchereria bancrofti, Brugia malayi. So both are lymphatic filarial worms, Onchocerca volvulus and Lova lova. These are they dwell more in the subcutaneous tissues. So they are transmitted by specific species of mosquitoes, other arthropods, and they have a very complex life cycle. So these adult worms, they either reside in the lymphatics or in the subcutaneous tissues of humans. So there's one very unique property, bacterial endosymbiont, Wolbachia. It has been found in all the intracellular stages of all these filarial worms, and now people are trying to eradicate this and use this in the antifilarial chemotherapy. And as we have seen with the other nematodes, here also there is a repeated prolonged exposure is needed to cause infection. And in the patients who are just new to the endemic areas, or who are migrants, or who are new to the endemic areas, they'll have more acute and intense disease as compared to those who are natives in the endemic areas. So lymphatic filariasis, I already told you, these are caused by Wuchereria bancrofti or Brugia malayi or Brugia timori. These are the 3 filarial worms which cause lymphatic filariasis. So these are thread-like adult parasites. They reside in the afferent lymphatics or lymph nodes, and these may remain viable for more than 2 to 3 decades. So they are alive for a long duration. Now coming to the organism proper, Wuchereria bancrofti. So these, they are seen in tropics and subtropics, including Asia, Pacific Islands, Africa, and some areas of Southern America, and even the Caribbean basin. And the definitive host, only human is the definitive host. And it is usually nocturnally periodic. So we have 2 forms, periodic and subperiodic forms. So the nocturnally periodic forms, they are usually scarce in the peripheral blood by daytime, and they increase at the night times. So any swab, if you take at the daytime, it doesn't give much of a microfilaria in the smear. So the smear has to be taken during the night times. The subperiodic forms, they are present in the peripheral blood at all the times, and they reach the maximal levels in the afternoon. The nocturnal natural vectors, they are Culex mosquitoes in the urban settings, whereas in rural areas, it is Anopheles or Aedes mosquitoes. Brugia malayi, it occurs primarily in the eastern India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines. It has a more common nocturnal form, which usually it occurs in the, it is found in the coastal rice fields. And you have a subperiodic form, which is found in the forests. So we have two forms here also for Brugia malayi also. One is nocturnal form, which is usually seen in the coastal rice fields, and subperiodic form, which is found in the forests. These they infect cats as well as humans. So Brugia infects both cats and humans. And Brugia timori is distributed only in the islands of southern eastern Indonesia. So this is the life cycle. Life cycle is same for even Brugia malayi or Wuchereria bancrofti. So what happens is the mosquito, it takes a blood meal. That is, it bites the human. Once it bites the human, the infected mosquito, so it has microfilaria in the proboscis. So this microfilaria, it enters the bloodstream of the human body. And from there, it goes into the lymphatics. So in the lymphatics, these microfilaria, they become adult worms. Adult worms stay in the lymphatics for a long duration. I already told they'll stay for about 2 to 3 decades. So these adult worms, uh, they again produce ensheathed microfilaria, and these microfilaria, they migrate into the lymph and blood channels. So these microfilaria, again, whenever an insect bites an infected human, these microfilaria, they are picked up by the insects. In the insects, these microfilaria, they shed the sheets and they penetrate the midgut and enter the thoracic cavity of the thoracic muscles. In the thoracic muscles, they again become larvae, L1 larvae and L3 larvae. This L3 larvae is the infective stage, where this migrates into the head and mosquito's proboscis, and from proboscis, whenever it bites a normal human being, these microfilaria enter the human body. So this is the life cycle of these filarial worms. But we are talking about only lymphatic filarial worms, whereas for the subcutaneous one, it is a little bit different. So they enter the subcutaneous tissue instead of lymphatics. The rest of the thing is not same for all the filarial worms. So pathology, adult worms live in the afferent lymphatics or sinuses of lymph nodes, and these cause lymphatic dilatation and thickening of the vessel walls. So this whatever disease can be because of the direct effect of the adult worms, or it can be because of the host reaction. Host also reacts to these inflammatory response. Host has an inflammatory response to any antigen. So this is worm is an outside organism. It enters the human body. So the host also has an inflammatory response. Because of this, also the patient has symptoms. So excuse me. So there will be infiltration of the plasma cells, eosinophils, macrophages in the infected vessels, in and around the infected vessels. So this will lead to endothelial and connective tissue proliferation. Once there is connective tissue proliferation, the endothelial tissue also proliferates. The lymphatics become tortuous. They become thick and tortuous, and they are damaged. So these damaged lymphatics, again, because of this, the lymph valves, they become incompetent. And because of that, there will be stasis, chronic stasis occurs. And because of chronic stasis, the skin becomes hard and brawny, and brawny edema develops, and lymphedema also develops because of this. And these lymphatic, because of this edema or stasis of the lymph in the vessels, there can be granulomatous and proliferative processes, which will finally, ultimately, over a long period of time, it will lead to lymphatic obstruction. So initially, there will be infiltrates of plasma cells, eosinophils, and macrophages in and around the infected vessels, and there will be tissue proliferation, endothelial and connective tissue proliferation, which will cause tortuosity of lymphatics, and these lymphatics, they'll be damaged, and lymph valves will be incompetent. Because of this, there will be chronic stasis of lymph, and this leads to thickening of the skin over the lymphatic over the extremities, lymphatics, wherever the lymphatics are affected, usually in the extremities. So the skin becomes thick and hard, and because of that, there will be lymphatic obstruction if this stasis stays for a longer duration. So how does the clinical features come? So the clinical features, like other nematodes, these filarials also can have asymptomatic phase. Asymptomatic microfilariemia can be there. The patients may develop hydrocele. The patient may have acute lymphangitis, or chronic lymphatic disease. So these are the 4 stages where they can occur. So asymptomatic or subclinical microfilariemia, even if there is subclinical infection, the patients on examination, the patient will have microscopic hematuria or proteinuria. There can be tortuosity and dilatation of the lymphatics. So if you have any suspicion, you'll have to do an ultrasound, or you can do a scintigraphy, lymphoscintigraphy, where you can see these lymphatics. So especially in men, the scrotal lymphangiectasia can occur, and this will be detected only by ultrasound. So if the men are affected with Wuchereria bancrofti, so there can be scrotal lymphangiectasia, but otherwise the patient will have no symptoms as such. So if you have a suspicion, you can examine the patient. Now, acute lymphangitis, adenolymphrangitis, these patients, they'll have high fever, there will be lymphatic inflammation, and local edema will be transient. There will be local edema. The extremities can be edematous. The lymphangitis is retrograde. Usually, whenever there is a parasite in one lymphatics, from around that, the lymphangitis will be retrograde. It will be from wherever that area, the adult parasites reside, from there, it will extend, the lymphangitis extends. So the regional lymph nodes usually are enlarged, and the entire lymphatic channel can become indurated and inflamed. There can be a concomitant local thrombophlebitis also, even veins can be inflamed. So this is a picture wherein you can see the right limb is inflamed. You can see the left limb is normal, whereas the right limb is inflamed. So at this stage, you can also think that this can be a cellulitis. It looks like a cellulitis because erythematous, inflamed, or swollen tissue is there. So you can always confuse it with cellulitis also. In Bruggen filariasis, what happens is usually there will be a small abscess which may form along the lymphatic tract, and subsequently this abscess, it ruptures into the surface. There can be lymphadenitis and lymphangitis of both upper and lower limbs. Involvement of genital lymphatics almost exclusively occurs with Bancrofti infection, and there can be folliculitis, epididymitis, scrotal pain, and tenderness. Now coming to dermatollymphangitis, so this occurs in patient. If it occurs in patients, the patients will have high fever with chills. Patient can complain of myalgia, severe headache, and the skin over that infected area, it will become edematous and inflammatory. Plaques can be seen. So a clear normal zone will be there, and edematous plaque area will be seen. So you can differentiate the diseased skin. There can be vesicular formation, ulceration, and hyperpigmentation also can occur. Usually, the patient gives a history of trauma or burns or irradiation, insect bites, or chemical injury. But still, you should have a doubt whenever the patient is from an endemic zone. So, entry lesions usually are seen especially over the interdigital area. So, these are very common. And as I already told, ADL and DLA both can be diagnosed as cellulitis initially if you don't give enough uh, if you don't look into it and properly. So with progression, there can be this lymphedema can develop, and lymphatic obstruction can occur, and there can be permanent changes, and which will lead to elephantiasis. So if the disease progresses over a long period, there is stasis, there is lymphedema over that, the skin becomes dark, hard, and brawny, and the leg becomes, or in extremity, it becomes very thick, and it looks like an elephant leg. So usually there will be early pitting edema, the initial stages, the edema will be pitting, but later it will become non-pitting because the subcutaneous tissue thickens and the skin also becomes hyperkeratosed. So because of that, there will be non-pitting edema. And after some time, there can be fissuring of the skin and hyperplastic changes also occur. And these, if they are these areas, because they are poorly vascularized, they may be super infected. Because of this, bacterial infection can set in over these tissues. So this is a typical picture where the elephantiasis is seen in both lower limbs. The upper limbs are normal, whereas both the lower limbs there is huge legs are seen, huge brawny edema is seen of the lower limbs. So in Bancroftian filariasis, usually hydroceles they develop. So in advanced stages, these hydroceles, there may be scrotal lymphedema and scrotal elephantiasis can be seen. Sometimes what happens, the retroperitoneal lymphatics, they'll be obstructed, and because of obstruction of retroperitoneal lymphatics, the renal lymphatic pressure increases, and this will lead to rupture of the renal lymphatics, and this can cause chyluria. This chyluria is typically intermittent, and it is most prominent in the mornings, early mornings. So because of this, there can be chyluria, so that is a passage of lymph in the urine. So this is a picture where there is a huge hydrocele because of filarial Bancroftian filariasis. So a small note in the travelers and transmigrants. So I already told a note because in travelers and transmigrants, usually the disease is very acute. Acute lymphatic and scrotal inflammation is seen. The patient may or may not have urticaria, and the patient will have localized angioedema. So lymphadenitis will be especially of epitrochlear, axillary, femoral, inguinal lymph nodes will be affected, and there will be retrograde lymphangitis also. Acute attacks usually are very short-lived, and the fever may not be there in these cases. So prolonged exposure may lead to permanent lymphatic inflammation and obstruction. So how do you diagnose these diseases? So we have to diagnose leukorrhea and Bruggia. So adult worms, usually they are localized in the lymphatic vessels or nodes, and usually they are not accessible. We cannot just go into the lymphatic vessels and remove them. So they are not accessible. So what are seen is microfilaria. These they'll come into the blood. So they can also be seen in hydrocele fluid, or some other fluids also can be seen. These microfilaria can be seen. So if you take out a sample of this and you can directly examine it, or for precise, if you want to concentrate it, you can concentrate, you can do a centrifugation, and you can fix it with the 2% formalin, and that is called as Knott's concentration technique. Or you can also do this, you can concentrate the parasites by passing the fluid through a polycarbonate cylindrical pore filter, which is 3 micron meter in diameter. So these 3 methods you can examine the fluid. You can either directly examine, or you can do a concentration method and examine. So usually we can find the microfilaria. Adult worms are not seen. And we also have antigens, circulating antigens of Wuchereria bancrofti. These antigens are used for assays. So assays are possible with Bancrofti antigens. So we have an enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. We have a rapid format immunochromatographic card test. So these are highly specific. They are almost 100% specific, and sensitivity is also quite high. So usually it is up to 93 to 100%. So for Bruggian filariasis, we don't have any tests for the circulating antigens of Bruggian filariasis. So only for Bancroftian filariasis, we have assays, and enzyme ELISA and immunochromatographic card test can be done. So polymerase chain reaction anyways can be done for all the filarial worms. And high frequency ultrasound with Doppler, we want to see if there is any lymphatic obstruction, or if there are any worms in the lymphatics. We can do a high frequency ultrasound. So radionuclide lymphoscintigraphic imaging also can be done of the limbs. And corroborative evidence again will be antifilarial antibodies if they are present, and if there is eosinophilia, and elevated serum concentrations of IgE, these are supportive. They are corroborative evidence of filarial infection. And rapid diagnostic tests, anyways, they are also available. So how do you treat these diseases? So treatment is diethyl carbamazine. So this is the drug. It has to be given in a dose of 6 milligram per kg daily for 12 days. So in during the if you suspect that there is a filarial infection, you have to give DEC. Even albendazole 400 milligram twice daily is also useful if it is given for 21 days, not as effective as DEC. Diethyl carbamazine, it acts both against the adult wounds and the microfilaria. But albendazole and oral doxycycline, they are only for, they are efficacious only for microfilaria. So DEC along with albendazole can also be used daily for 7 days. So in addition to DEC, a 3-week course of doxycycline is also efficacious in lymphatic filariasis. So DEC is the drug of choice for filarial infection, lymphatic filariasis. So there are some regimens which combine a single doses of albendazole with DEC or ivermectin. So ivermectin 200 microgram per kg. They also have sustained microfilaricidal effect, but ivermectin is contraindicated in pregnant ladies and it is contraindicated in lactating females. So ivermectin cannot be used in pregnant ladies. For ADL support, because there will be fever and myalgias, you have to give antipyretics and analgesics. If there is any secondary bacterial infection, obviously you need to add antibiotic therapy. So chronic infections, again chronic, if there are chronic manifestations, there is swelling, there is non-pitting edema, the skin has become thick. Sometimes the skin may ulcerate also. For all this, to prevent all this, you need to maintain a good hygiene, and you have to prevent secondary infections. And physiotherapy is also necessary for maintenance of normal limb activity. Hydrocele anyways have to be managed surgically. And DEC side effects are fever, chills, arthralgias, headaches, myalgias. They are very mild, so they can be treated otherwise also. How do you prevent? Like all things, the vector, there is a vector for this, so you have to use bed nets, and especially if the bed nets are impregnated with insecticides such as permethrin, so you can avoid contact with infected microbes, mosquitoes. So mass drug administration with DEC is also the current approach to eliminate lymphatic filariasis. So they are giving a mass drug administration in endemic areas. So a small note on tropical pulmonary eosinophilia. What is this? This is a distinct syndrome that develops in some individuals infected with lymphatic dwelling filarial species. It is a distinct syndrome. It develops in some individuals infected with lymphatic dwelling filarial species. So majority of the cases have been reported from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Brazil, and Southeast Asia. So what happens is the microfilaria and parasite antigens, they are rapidly cleared by the from the bloodstream by the lungs. The lungs usually they clear off these microfilaria and parasite antigens. But what happens? The symptoms they result from the allergic and inflammatory reactions. Because of these parasites, once they enter into the lungs or bloodstream, they elicit allergic and inflammatory reactions. So because of these reactions, there will be clinical symptoms. Sometimes what happens is these microfilaria, they're trapped in the reticuloendothelial organs. So they can cause hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, or lymphadenopathy. Because of trapping of these microfilaria, these organs can be enlarged. So a prominent eosinophil enriched intraalveolar infiltrate is commonly seen, and release of cytotoxic pro-inflammatory eosinophil granule proteins, these may mediate the pathology. If there is no treatment, if you don't treat the patient, the interstitial fibrosis can lead to progressive damage. So lung can be damaged permanently if you don't treat. So clinical features, especially the patient gives a history of residence in the endemic region. The patient can have paroxysmal cough and wheezing. There will be weight loss. There will be low-grade fever, and lymph nodes will be enlarged. Even hepatomegaly and splenomegaly can be seen. And on examination, there will be blood eosinophilia. Eosinophilia will be very marked. That is, more than 3,000 eosinophils will be seen per micron liter. If you do a chest X-ray or a CT scan, they can be normal, or sometimes they may show increased bronchiovascular markings. And there can be diffuse miliary lesions or mottled opacities, especially in the middle and lower lung fields. And if you do a pulmonary function test, most of the times it is restrictive pattern. Sometimes an obstructive defect can also be seen. And the total serum IgE levels and antifilarial antibody levels are markedly elevated. So these will be very much elevated. You have to differentiate this tropical pulmonary eosinophilia syndrome from these conditions. Asthma, obviously, here also IgE and IgE will be elevated, but antifilarial antibodies will be not there. Loeffler syndrome, we have already seen. Loeffler syndrome is seen in ascariasis. So ascariasis, there ascarial antibodies antigens or antibodies can be seen. Here you see filarial antibodies. So other diseases like allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis and granulomatous diseases like Churg-Strauss syndrome and periarteritis nodosa, all these diseases you have to differentiate from tropical pulmonary eosinophilia. Treatment is usually diethyl carbamazine in a daily dose of 4 to 6 milligram per kg. You have to give for a total of 2 weeks, 14 days. Symptoms usually resolve within a week, but in about 25% of the cases, 1/4 of the cases, there will be relapse. And relapse may occur even after several years also. So you have to retreat the relapse also with the same treatment, DEC, 4 to 6 milligram per kg for 14 days. Now coming to the third filarial worm, which we are interested in is Onchocerca volvulus. So this onchocerciasis, it is also called as river blindness. So this vector is Simulian black fly. Here, black fly is the vector. Here, I told you the life cycle is a little bit different. The larva L3 is taken up by the proboscis, and here the microfilaria, they enter into the human body. Here, in the human body, they enter the subcutaneous tissues. The adults are formed in the subcutaneous tissues. And these adults, they produce microfilaria again in the skin and in the lymphatics or connective tissue, lymphatics of the connective tissue. But they can also go into the peripheral blood, but very less number of times. Peripheral blood, urine and sputum. They can enter blood, urine and sputum also, but usually they are seen in the subcutaneous tissues and lymphatics of the connective tissues. Here, whenever the mosquito bites, again the microfilaria are taken up by the mosquito, black fly. And this black fly, this microfilaria, they penetrate the midgut and enter the thoracic muscles. Here they become larva 1 and L3 stage. Again L3 stage, they migrate to the proboscis of the black fly, and from here it infects the human body. So this is a slight difference from the lymphatic Bancroftian and Bruggian filariasis. So usually what happens is this onchocerciasis, it usually affects the skin, eyes and lymph nodes. So more dangerous is the eyes. The damage is usually elicited by the microfilaria. In Eukarya and Brugia, it is the adult parasite which elicits the disease. But here it is the microfilaria which causes the damage. So in the skin, the damage is mild, but usually there will be chronic inflammatory changes, and the elastic fibers will be lost. There will be atrophy and fibrosis in the skin. So because of this, there will be elasticity of the skin. We'll see how it goes. There will typically onchocercomata, the subcutaneous nodules are seen, which usually it is the inflammatory cells. There will be a peripheral ring of inflammatory cells around the adult worm, and on top of this there will be endothelial layer. So these subcutaneous nodules, they are primarily fibrous tissues surrounding the adult worm, often with a peripheral ring of inflammatory cells surrounded by endothelial layer. in the eye, there will be neovascularization and corneal scarring, which will lead to corneal opacities and blindness. Last time also same thing happened. So in the eye, there will be neovascularization and corneal scarring, which will lead to corneal opacities and blindness. So this is called as river blindness. Inflammation will be there in the anterior and posterior chambers, and this will result in uveitis, chorioretinitis, and optic atrophy. So there can be punctate opacities because of inflammatory reaction surrounding the microfilaria, either dead or dying microfilaria. So clinical features will be again on the skin. Over the skin, there will be intense itching. Pruritus will be there. There can be rash, and there will be premature wrinkling and exaggerated wrinkling of the skin because of loss of elastic fibers and atrophy of the epidermal tissue. There will be loose and redundant skin, and skin can be hypo or hyperpigmented. There will be localized eczematoid dermatitis, and this can cause hyperkeratosis, scaling, and pigmentary changes on the skin. The skin will become all scaly and hyperkeratosed. So an immunologically hyperreactive form of oncodermatitis is usually termed SAUDA or localized oncodermatitis. In this the affected skin becomes darkens. It becomes more dark, and there will be profound inflammation. Because of profound inflammation, the skin becomes hyperpigmented. So here you can see the skin becomes all plaquey and all hyperpigmented. Onchosarcomata, so this is a specific subcutaneous nodules. They're either palpable or visible nodules, and these nodules, they contain this is a fibrous tissue surrounding the adult worm. So the adult worm, around the adult worm, there will be fibrous tissue and epithelial layers. So these usually are seen over the coccyx, the sacrum, or trochanter of the femur. They can be seen on the lateral anterior crest or other bony prominences. So most commonly they are seen on the coccyx, sacrum, and trochanter of the femur. The nodules are of different sizes. They are firm and they are not tender. So non-tender, firm subcutaneous nodules of different sizes are seen. So for every palpable nodule, for every nodule that you can see, there will be around approximately 4 deeper non-palpable nodules. So you have to see that inside the subcutaneous tissue, non-palpable nodules will also be there in a ratio of 1:4. So this is a typical subcutaneous nodule which is palpable. So this is a subcutaneous nodule. So now coming to the ocular tissue, this eye involvement. Visual impairment is the most serious complication of onchocerca volvulus. So lesions develop in all parts of the eye. Most common finding is conjunctivitis with photophobia. So this is the early finding. So if the patient comes with conjunctivitis and photophobia, he needs to be investigated and treated immediately to postpone all this or to intervene, not going into the complications. So the other parts will be, there will be punctate keratitis, like snowflake opacities are seen, usually more common in the younger patients. And this keratitis usually it resolves without any complications. So up to this stage it is okay. But later what happens, there will be sclerosing keratitis in about 1 to 5% of infected persons. And this is the most common cause of onchocercal blindness. So anterior uveitis and iridocyclitis develops in about 5% of infected patients. And characteristic chorioretinal lesions develop usually because of atrophy and hyperpigmentation of the retinal pigment epithelium. So there will be atrophy and hyperpigmentation of retinal pigment epithelium. Because of this, there will be chorioretinal lesions. And the visual fields constrict, and there can be overt optic atrophy, which is the dreaded complication. So this is river blindness. There is corneal opacity, both the eyes. Now, lymph nodes, usually there will be mild to moderate lymphadenopathy, especially in the inguinal and femoral areas. The enlarged nodes, they may hang down in response to gravity. Because of huge nodes, the lymph nodes have become very large. They may hang down, and these are called as hanging groin sign. And these hanging lymph nodes, they may predispose to inguinal and femoral hernias. So here is the hanging groin. Because of lymph nodes, there can be even hernias. So other things are the patient will lose weight because of loss of adipose tissue and muscle mass. The patient will become cachexia. And a typical form of dwarfism, that is Nakalanga dwarfism, it has been attributed to pituitary involvement in these diseases. In this infection, pituitary involvement is seen, leading to Nakalanga dwarfism. And there has been an association also seen with epilepsy in this disease. And this epidemic form, it is usually termed as nodding syndrome in onchocerciasis. So how do you detect? Here you have to detect because it is in the subcutaneous tissue, adult worm can be seen. And more commonly, even microfilaria is also seen in the skin nip. You take a skin nip. How do you take a skin nip? A corneal scleral punch, or you can lift the skin with the tip of a needle and excise a small portion, that is about 1 to 3 mm piece. And then this piece, it has to be incubated for about 2 to 4 hours minimum. So usually what they do is they incubate it over the overnight incubation is done, and then microfilaria, they can be seen emerging from the skin in low power microscopy, or also can be detected by PCR. So skin nips are obtained and examined. Immunoassays to detect antibodies are also there, and they are usually seen in specialized laboratories or at point of contact in rapid diagnostic format. So either in the labs or in fields. Treatment: ivermectin orally in a single dose of 150 microgram per kg. It can be given either yearly or half yearly. So if you give more frequent ivermectin, usually if the patient has pruritus, intense pruritus and skin lesions, they subside with more frequent ivermectin, especially if you give every 3 months. And as I already told, ivermectin is contraindicated in pregnant and breastfeeding females. And a 6-week course of doxycycline is macrofilaria-static, and it renders the female adult worm sterile for long periods. So even doxycycline can be used. How do you prevent? Insecticide spraying and community-based administration of ivermectin every 6 to 12 months. But no prophylaxis is available for onchocerca. The last one is loa loa. So it is caused by loiasis, is caused by loa loa. So adult parasites, they live in the subcutaneous tissues. Females are longer, so they are 50 to 70 millimeters long and 0.5 millimeters wide, whereas males are short, 25 to 35 millimeters long and 0.25 millimeters wide. So these microfilaria, they circulate in the blood and they have a diurnal periodicity. Usually they peak at 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if you take a blood smear during this time, it will be more successful. So they have a diurnal periodicity. The pathology is, however, poorly understood. We don't know how this microfilaria causes the disease. And Calabar swellings, they are thought to result from a hypersensitivity reaction to the adult worm antigens. So what are these swellings? We'll see. The clinical features, usually the patient can be asymptomatic with just microfilaria. And only if you see a adult worm in the subconjunctiva, then only infection can be recognized. So episodic Calabar swellings. Calabar swellings are evanescent localized areas of angioedema and erythema. They develop on the extremities or other sides, usually on the extremities. So these are localized areas of angioedema and erythema. These are called as Calabar swellings. So in these cases, there can be nephropathy, encephalopathy, cardiomyopathy or also can occur, but they are very rare but fatal. So non-endemic residents, so people who come to or travelers or who are transmigrants, they are allergic. In them, allergic symptoms are the most predominant, and episodes of Calabar swellings they tend to be more frequent, and microfilariemia is less common. Eosinophilia and increased levels of antifilarial antibodies are characteristic. So eosinophilia and antifilarial antibodies are characteristically seen in these patients. How do you diagnose? Again, detection of microfilaria in the peripheral blood, or you can isolate the adult worm from the eye. Subconjunctival, if you take a specimen, subcutaneous biopsy can be taken, and from there you can remove the adult worm. PCR-based assays can be done in specialized laboratories, and these PCR obviously is highly sensitive and specific. And newer antigen, recombinant antigen-based serological techniques are also being developed. So this is a adult toe all over worm. It is being extracted from the subconjunctival tissue. So how do you diagnose? Usually there is a characteristic history and clinical presentation will be there mostly with the adult worm over the subcutaneous tissue. There will be blood eosinophilia and elevated levels of antifilarial antibodies. And especially if the travelers are from a non-endemic area, they will be often amicrofilariemic. So you have to identify in travelers. Treatment again is diethyl carbamazine 8 to 10 milligram per kg per day orally for 21 days. So here the treatment is for a longer duration, 21 days. So for Bancrofti and Brugia it is 12 days. For Onchocerca it is 14 days, and for Loa Loa it is 21 days. So multiple courses are usually necessary to completely resolve loiasis. And usually if there is any heavy microfilariemia, if there is heavy infection, then the allergic and inflammatory responses will be very high, and they may lead to CNS involvement causing coma and encephalitis also. So this microfilariemia, if it is heavy, then what do we need? We need to do a apheresis to remove the microfilaria, and we can also add glucocorticoids, 40 to 60 milligrams of prednisolone per day, and then you can administer diethyl carbamazine in a dose of 0.5 milligram per kg per day. So once the adverse effects are, there are no more adverse effects, the prednisolone dose can be tapered very fast, and then DEC can be increased gradually to 8 to 10 milligram per kg per day in cases of heavy infection. Thank you.